Welcome back to the Morning Blend. The conversation in our country now about race is something that will probably continue for a very long time, and many are hopeful that it will lead to positive changes.
Last week, I had the chance to chat with a very good friend of mine that I met in our Miss America days, Elizabeth Hunterton. We talked about how she faced racism throughout her life, what she teaches her kids, and she even shared a moment about finding common ground with people who don't believe in the same things she does. I knew her story had to be shared. Take a look. So Elizabeth, you and I met in 2005. You were Miss Nevada, and we met at Miss America. You were the first Black Miss Nevada to represent your state at the Miss America pageant. And I think you have one of the most unique experiences relating to race. And so I wanted to share your perspective. Can you share a little bit of your story?
Oh, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you. I was found at the Reno airport in 1980, discovered by two pilots and then taken by law enforcement into social services. I was adopted and raised by two white parents with my adopted brother who was Hispanic and Native American. And we grew up in rural Nevada, predominantly white, going to all white schools most of my life, and but also being Black within that all white environment. So it shaped a very different, eclectic perspective. But then also I didn't know my race. So I genuinely thought I could belong to any race, and spent my entire life looking at everybody, finding commonalities and thinking, I wonder if we're related. So it's been this really unique experience, but I didn't realize what a blessing it was until especially now.
Well, that's something I want to touch on a little bit, because you bring up, in a lot of the posts that you share on social media, this idea of belonging. And I think, we all just sort of want to have this unconditional acceptance for who we are. And so I want to get to that in a little bit, but I do want to know kind of how you're doing, how your family is doing, and just kind of your thoughts overall on what's happening in our country after the death of George Floyd.
I mean, what happened with George Floyd is so unspeakably tragic, and it's no doubt that its effect is being felt around the world. And in our house, the conversations are very different. I think like everyone else, my heart is heavy and I'm tired, and I'm trying really hard to be hopeful. I have very different discussions with my husband, who is white, than I do with my 18-year-old stepson, who is Black, and my 5 and 6-year-old boys, who are mixed race. They're all really different conversations, but those conversations are sources of hope. My 5-year-olds, I'm trying to teach them to be ready and prepared for encounters with law enforcement. Like, they know they have to do big fingers, like big arms, big fingers, so somebody knows they don't have anything. My 18-year-old, he knows everything to do if he's ever encountered by law enforcement. My husband knows what to do if I'm ever targeted by racists, what I would like him to do. So we're having these conversations that I don't know that we would have otherwise.
It's heartbreaking to hear you talk about that and having those conversations, but they're important. They're important to have in today's world. And I want you to share some experiences, because you bring up this topic of being targeted by racism, and you have experienced it. And is it true, you've said before, that you've rarely gone a month without being the target of an uncomfortable racial encounter?
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's being asked to show my receipt, and not in a store where that's commonplace, but where somebody comes up to me and says, I am so sorry. My manager has asked me to see your receipt, and I know she wouldn't ask me if you looked different. I'm so sorry. And I show her the receipt, because I know that says more about the manager than it does about me. Just last month, I was chased down the street by a racist in a pickup truck who was yelling racial slurs and threats to me while my 2 sons were in the back of my car. So every month it's something. It's just a matter of what's it going to be. And depending on where I go kind of determines the severity of it. It's kind of the reality.
That reality isn't something that most people will experience, that a lot of people will experience, but it's a reality that many people of color do experience every single day. And oftentimes we don't even see it. So I think it's important to highlight those experiences and talk about some of them, so that they are brought to light. We do start to understand and communicate in a stronger way. Let's talk about the belonging, because it's something that, you've talked about, the fact being unable to identify with a race early on. You've since found out you're Japanese and Black, but this idea of belonging and this unity. And I'd love to hear if you, on the flip side, have experienced moments of unity.
I certainly have. And I think that belonging especially when you start the way I do, where you don't look like anyone in your environment. It becomes so critical and a real cornerstone and foundation for who you are. But one of the most unifying experiences I ever had was when I had an open, honest discussion with an extreme racist. And we found common ground. And upon that common ground, we built a friendship. Because for many of the reasons he was resorting to extreme racism are a lot of the same reasons I ran track. I was looking for a team, as somebody, a group of people who believed as I did and wanted the same things I did. And we don't have to have everything in common to have something in common. And then even with, in the wake of tragedy, you can see incredible examples of unity, whether it's from peaceful protests that we've seen or the unity that came after our city was struck with unspeakable tragedy with the mass shooting of October 1. I wouldn't wish these kind of tragedies on any city, but the unity that can come only in the wake of these tragedies is something so powerful, so unshakable, and so beautiful that we continue to remain strong and unified despite these divisive times because of what we experienced as a city together 2 years ago. And that is my sincere hope for all of these cities that find themselves amidst these tragedies and the destruction, is the unity that comes in the wake of that and the change that can come because of that is really something to behold. It really is.
I love every ounce of everything you just said there. I think that's absolutely beautiful. And, it's not enough, we know, to talk. We have to be better. We have to do better. So just kind of on an ending note, you're a mother, you've got 3 kids, as you mentioned, you're a woman of color. What can we do every single day? What can we say to our kids, and what can we do to spark change?
I think that first acknowledging that there are those of us who are going to experience hardships strictly because of the color of our skin. Doesn't matter about education levels or socioeconomic, strictly based on skin color. And if we can raise our kids to ensuring that those moments of hardship are made easier by them and by us, then we're doing our job as parents. It may never fully go away, but I'm raising my kids to never contribute to those hardships, nor to ignore them, and to make them easier for the person on the receiving end of that. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts we can give right now.
Thank you so much for joining me, Liz. I love you.
Oh, I love you too. It's good to see
Thanks
you.
for sharing your message.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
What a great conversation. Thank you so much, Tiff, for sharing it.
Yeah, it was incredible to share her story.